Hello and welcome to today's episode of Taekwondo Life Magazine Live. My name is Mark Sorianis. I'm your host, a third Dan black belt and the editor-in-chief of Taekwondo Life Magazine. We are a member of the Believe Sports Network. Do you believe? Before we get started, I want to let you know my free shipping set of bottles of Balance 7 came in. Balance 7 is the highly alkalizing concentrate liquid that is used. You drink it, it's supposed to help offset the acid buildup in your body and help keep us young and youthful and maintaining good health. Lamar Odom swears by it. We've been talking about it for the past couple of weeks. When you go over to balance7.com, you enter in the code BLEAV, B-L-E-A-V, our podcast network, and you get free shipping. I'm going to start on it. I ordered myself. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can shop for this and maintain it, but I ordered for myself some of the to-go bottles. I think it was a 12-pack or no, 6 of bottles. They also have like 64-ounce bottles, so you could refill things. They have dispenser. It's great. It's very easy. It is. They have it in lemon flavor and original. And I suggest you give it a try, especially for those of us that are aging up as athletes. While we hate to admit it, it's tough on the body, but it's something that we need to do. So today's program is a little bit different from what we've talked about. I did want to remind everybody that this program releases that this week, I believe on Tuesday night, will be the finals for America's Got Talent. We're in the second week of September, and it's a great opportunity for the Taekwondo community around the world to do whatever you need to do to vote on NBC's app or on the website. I would certainly check out their demonstration, but it's for the finals. Again, no matter what happens, it's a tremendous victory. The World Taekwondo demonstration team and Team M, they've just done a wonderful job representing the Taekwondo community with their high-level demonstration, with exposing the world to what it is that we're all about, and with their powerful messages of peace and of unity and really the message that we try to teach in the dojangs for Taekwondo. So that's this week. Look out for that. We'll certainly post the results on our website. Today's show is a little bit odd. It comes from the genesis of I saw a commercial for both the new Matrix film, Matrix 4, I think it's called Resurrections, starring Keanu Reeves. And then I was reading about the new John Wick movie, John Wick 4, which will have, among other people, Scott Adkins, who's been on this program, Donnie Yen, one of the greatest martial artist movie stars and martial artists in the world. We talked about him. We recently reviewed his film, Raging Fire. But that film will be coming out as well. 2 big blockbusters. And in watching that and in thinking about the success of Keanu Reeves and his film archives, I thought to myself that, we do so much and cover so many martial arts films and martial artists, but that really the premise that I'm going under is to ask the question, is Keanu Reeves the biggest martial arts movie star of all time? Now, again, I know that's somewhat controversial. People will be screaming, talking about Bruce Lee, talking about Donnie Yen. And again, I want to be very clear about what the topic is. The topic is whether or not he's the biggest martial arts movie star in the world. I'm not saying he's the biggest martial arts practitioner in the world. I'm not necessarily saying he's the best martial arts movie star in the world. I'm not saying his movies are the best, but I want to think about and I want to talk about the premise. Before we do that, this week our show comes right at the start of the football season. You know that BetOnline has been a long-term sponsor of ours now. It is the best place for your online sportsbook betting. You know that when you go over to BetOnline and you make your first deposit, they give you a 50% welcome deposit There have been a number of games. There was a big contest for opening day Thursday of the football season, and there's a ton of things that you can bet on, that you can spend. You can actually spend a lot of time navigating the Bet Online site just to find interesting things that people are talking about. Again, whether it be political elections, whether it be Academy Awards, whether it be box office stuff, they always have the odds, the odds on these different things. Now that football season has started, it's really a great time to join Bet Online. You can go over to betonline.ag and sign up. And again, you could do that from your phone or from your computer, and you get your welcome bonus. So again, I went back and I went back and watched the first 3 Matrix movies. I happen to think, and I still think, The Matrix is one of the best movies of all time. It is probably one of the best science fiction movies of all time, but it is also one of the best martial arts movies of all time. In full disclosure, I actually was disappointed in number 2 and hated number 3 when I saw them the first time. Watching them again, aged up, maybe I've aged up, maybe just watching them together, I actually thought they were very good. They certainly are not The Matrix, but nothing will compare to The Matrix in many ways. But as I went through The Matrix, I said, well, this really is a martial arts movie, right? I know it comes up on martial arts lists, but it truly is a martial arts movie. The fight scenes, the fight choreography, much of the philosophy of it is a martial arts movie. But that in and of itself isn't a standalone for Keanu Reeves. And, one of the things is that Keanu Reeves has such a broad book of projects, right? He's known, when I interviewed Kung Lee several years ago, the great Kung Lee, mixed martial artist, movie star, great advocate for Asian community and talking about Asian American violence. Kung Lee said, nobody's paying to see Kung Lee in a broman, in a rom-com. And I laughed, and I thought he had a good point, right? People want to see Kung Lee in martial arts action films. Perhaps if Keanu Reeves has gotten his start in action, come in through that way as a martial artist and made his way into movies, very much like Bruce Lee did, or very much like so many of the people, Kung Lee, Donnie Yen, perhaps that would be true. But Keanu Reeves happened to have done it reverse, right? He's an actor first, and he has everything from comedies, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, to romance movies with Sandra Bullock, to some of the highest grossing action and martial arts action films in the world. But he himself always disclaims being a martial artist. He says, he was asked, I did a lot of research, and I was listening to a podcast interview he did called Conversations with Charlie. He did it in exactly 2 years ago, in 2019, and asked about it. And he said, I don't know martial arts. I only know movie kung fu. Well, that's probably true, but we certainly know from speaking to people here, including Scott Atkins, who is a great martial artist, that martial arts movie action is not martial arts, right? It's the antithesis of martial arts in some ways, because martial arts movie action is designed to prolong the fight, prolong the violence, be filled with acrobatics and interesting moves. When we fight in the street, or what we learn to fight in self-defense, is short, brief moves that conserve our energy and disable our opponent quickly. So there's a humility there, which is really a martial artist humility of Keanu Reeves. But when you look at his movies and you look at the work in his movies and you really watch them, they're really martial arts movies, so many of them. And while I'm not saying he didn't have stunt doubles, the movies are filmed because they're filmed by such brilliant filmmakers as the Wachowskis and Chad from, I'm sorry, I drew a blank, from the John Wick movies. They are filmed in a way that you have an opportunity to see when it is Keanu Reeves actually fighting and doing the stunts himself. And he does do a lot of his his own stunts, and a lot of the fights are close up. Chad Stahelski, and to some degree, John Wick comes out of the 1999 film The Matrix because of Chad Stahelski's work on that. But if we just look at some of Keanu Reeves's works, and I'll talk about them now, right? If you go back to his earlier movies, he's in a movie with who? Somebody who's considered to some degree a martial arts movie star, or a movie star that had martial arts skill, which is Patrick Swayze, right? They were in Point Break together. Certainly not a martial arts movie, but certainly some action and some fighting in there. Those guys together. That movie was 1991, all the way back to 1991. Then, of course, we have Speed, which Speed has a lot of action, not a lot of fighting. There's a little fighting with Dennis Hopper, but I certainly wouldn't in any way say if those were by his body of work that we would consider him maybe even as an action star. But then you move into The Matrix. And as I said, The Matrix has got high level martial arts fighting, kung fu, hand-to-hand combat. Yes, it does have some high wire work and some very over-the-top acrobatics, but so does Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and no one doubts the martial arts movie status of people like Jet Li. But due to the budget of that film, Keanu Reeves went and trained in fighting and the martial arts, and yes, movie martial arts, but he did it for 4 months. Think about martial arts training and the training that we do. You say 4 months may not be long. Well, it may not be long if you're going 2 to 3 days a week, but if you're going as your full-time job, 8 hours a day, 5, 6 days a week, 4 hours of martial arts training, that's pretty significant. And it showed off, it paid off in that film, in the way that film played out. But then you go in, of course, to the sequel to that movie in 2003, the Matrix Reloaded. He goes from his amazing fight scene with Morpheus in The Matrix and with Agent Smith in the subway scene, iconic hand-to-hand fighting with Agent Smith. You go weaving to The Matrix Reloaded, where he's fighting not one Agent Smith, but he fights the classic scene where he's fighting an entire cluster of Agent Smiths. I don't think I'm giving anything away. These movies are old, so if you haven't seen them, you should see them before number 4 comes out. I don't know how much action will be in number 4. Then you go up onto Matrix Revolutions, and of course there is a dramatic scene at the end of that, fighting the super re-energized Agent Smith. Certainly some great stuff. In watching the Matrix now, I'm a little bit older, and watching all 3 films, if you go back and you watch Keanu Reeves throw a sidekick, which he throws many sidekicks in those films, his sidekick is clean. It's a great sidekick. I don't care. You can't tell me that, oh, he's such a great actor that he's faking a sidekick. A sidekick is a sidekick. He executes a sidekick with great precision. His form is great. It's not a special effect, the way he holds his body. Roundhouse kicks, done with proper technique. Hook kicks, very hard to do, done with great techniques. And of course, the hand techniques. Now, in between that, or actually after that, we go to 2 films, martial arts films, neither of which did very well, one of which is probably better reviewed. I'll start with the lesser one first, which is 47 Ronin in 2013. 47 Ronin is a samurai film. It's a fantasy film. Is it a martial arts film? I don't know. There's tons of films. I read all the lists of the best martial arts films. There's a ton that have look at The Last Dragon. Has tons of like fantasy and fantasy fighting. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles makes the list. Kung Fu Panda. So why is 47 Ronin any different from those films? Like the film, don't like the film. At its heart, it's a martial arts fantasy. But then a film that Keanu Reeves directed, he got together with, from The Matrix, the man who he credits with much of his martial arts training and martial arts movie training, Yuen Woo-Ping. who helped him do the fight choreography in a movie that I love. I've talked about it before, The Man from Tai Chi. That movie, Reeves plays a villain. Tiger Chen is in it. Iko Uwais is in it. There's, I think Dave Bautista has a scene in it. There's numbers of famous people in that movie. And ultimately, at the end of that, the climax of that film, Keanu Reeves has a very, very good fight scene with Tiger Chen with close-ups, hand to hand. And it is very, very good. That in and of itself, if that was the only movie he ever made, I think would qualify him as a martial arts movie star, action star. But then we get into an entire other cluster of movies, right? John Wick, John Wick 2, John Wick 3 Parabellum, and now we're going into John Wick 4. Now look at those films. Those films contain, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, they contain tons of hand-to-hand combat fighting, jiu-jitsu, judo. John Wick is, those films are a classic in the sense that they are the complete ultimate elevation of martial arts and action and story. But they're also classics because they elevate an appreciation and a visual understanding of gunplay that is elevated to a level that's probably almost never been seen in movies, but also martial arts and hand-to-hand, right? Many times you see it's either one or the other. A movie is great on the gunplay, it's great on the car chases, or it's great on the hand-to-hand, but not both. John Wick is really an outlier in the sense that it is, and so many films copied their understanding and analysis. Again, it's about the training, right? John Wick, Keanu Reeves said he spent months and months and months doing gun trainings to the point where when you see him, he seems natural holding that gun, putting that gun together, shooting that gun. Same thing with his martial arts, another period of time that he became engaged in serious training, and everybody involved. Halle Berry became involved in serious martial arts training. So the John Wick films are a perfect example of those. Now, turn around, and I really did a tremendous amount of research because my premise again is that he's the biggest martial arts movie star in the world. And I wanted to be able to support that. And again, I know there's blowback. I'm not saying Bruce Lee's clearly the greatest martial artist that ever lived. He's clearly the most influential martial arts movie star that ever lived. But let's look at the facts. Bruce Lee's really known for Enter the Dragon, Fists of Fury, Chinese Connection, posthumous Game. Very few movies, right? He only made a couple of movies. Keanu Reeves made more martial arts movies than Bruce Lee ever made in the United States, and certainly grossed more money. And Bruce Lee is considered the greatest martial artist and the most influential, which he is. But I don't think you can discredit Keanu Reeves in that sense. He trained with Higan Machado for in BJJ for getting ready for John Wick. I watched Joe Rogan, who's hypercritical, obviously Taekwondo trained and UFC and commentator and MMA guy. And his exact words were that the video is called, and you can reference any of these, Keanu Reeves is legit. And that's from 2018. He's talking about that as a martial artist, in watching him and watching the way that he's trained and watching training videos and watching him in the films, that he's a legitimate martial artist. Now you turn around, and I've seen videos where for the film John Wick, famous Judaicas went frame by frame watching the film and talking about the judo techniques that were used in John Wick, executed by Keanu Reeves, and praising the execution of those moves. Now, again, I understand that those things don't happen in and of themselves, right? We talked about the movie The Art of Self-Defense. Mindy Kelly took people that were never involved in the martial arts and trained them quickly to be able to star in a movie about martial arts. Jesse Eisenberg, for one. So certainly it's the stunt and film and fight choreographers, but Keanu Reeves is actually training in this art and properly executing those moves. I watched this film Gunpowder Milkshake on Netflix I reviewed it. One of my criticisms of it is the fight scenes are terrible. I like the movie. It's an interesting movie. It's a fun movie, but the execution of the fight scenes is just not realistic at all. The woman who stars in it is very, very gifted, but she's not a gifted fighter. She's not a gifted fight choreographer. It's not believable. None of that's true in John Wick. We then go to John Wick 2, and there was another video of somebody who is a BJJ, black belt, grappling expert. They reviewed and broke down John Wick 2 and talked about the execution of all of the moves in that film, praising his proper execution, his proper application of technique, his proper use of the forms of BJJ. You look at 47 Ronin, you look at the other films, and his understanding of weapons and his weapons training. So what makes someone a martial art movie star, right? He's good with weapons. He's good with his hands. He can throw a good side kick, a good roundhouse kick, a good spinning hook kick. He's good with judo. He's good with Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So he humbly says, I know movie kung fu, but what is the transition there? How much training has Keanu Reeves had in his life compared to many people who spend 3 years training and stop and never go on? Are they no longer a martial artist? No, you're a martial artist for life. He's been doing this for at least 22 years, intensely. Now let's look a little bit more at the premise of what we're talking about. I'm talking about his influence and whether or not he's the biggest martial arts movie star in the world. Well, that's not necessarily just because I like him, because his movies are well rated. Let's look at the numbers. The Matrix alone trilogy has made box office gross of $1.6 billion. $1.6 billion. That's without the fourth movie coming out, and that's without probably the major re-releases and things for numbers 1, 2, 3. The John Wick trilogy has made over $600 million. $600 million. Keanu Reeves' worldwide box office gross for films, not just these films, but all of his films, including the rom-coms and the Bill and Ted's, exceed $6 billion. $6 billion. More than a third of that comes from the Matrix and John Wick trilogies, but the rest is from everything else. But $6 billion, which means that his impact, his influence, his visibility is greater than almost anybody on the scene today, certainly greater than any martial arts movie star that ever lived. Now, Donnie Yen is a huge star. He's huge in China. China's a huge market. He's made a ton of money. I don't know what the numbers are on Donnie Yen's numbers, but in terms of global impact, yes, Donnie Yen is. And now it'll be interesting to see Donnie Yen and Keanu Reeves in the new John Wick film. But I think it's without argument that if he's not the top, that he's one of the top that should be considered in the conversation of the greatest martial arts movie stars of the 20th and 21st century, particularly of the 21st century. The Matrix was 1999, so it was right on the turn of the century. But certainly for the 21st century, the 2 Matrix films, the 3 John Wick films, and the other 2 films that are to come. But I would consider the Matrix to be a 21st century film since it was released at the end of 1999. That John Wick, that Keanu Reeves' films are among the best and most influential martial arts films of all time, and that Keanu Reeves is the biggest martial arts movie and action star in the world by far. And that will be solidified if either or both of the Matrix and the John Wick films have the type of success that I'm expecting that they have. And I've seen the commercial for the Matrix. There doesn't seem to be a lot of action, but I'm certain that that is not the way that things will unfold. Do you agree with my thoughts? Do you disagree with my thoughts? I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Do you like the Matrix films better, or do you like the John Wick films better? For me, it's tough. I probably like the John Wick character better, and I probably like the John Wick films better. However, I think that standalone, The Matrix is one of the greatest films ever made, one of the greatest science fiction films ever made, one of the greatest films ever made, and one of the greatest martial arts films ever made. I think it stands the test of time. Watching it after 22 years, it was amazing to me that it holds up in every way, shape, or form, from the acting to the visuals to the fight scenes to the fight choreography. So I would love to hear what you have to say. I'd love to hear your opinion and your feedback on it. Don't be shy. Be sure to like and subscribe us everywhere that podcasts are found. And don't forget that this episode has been presented by our friends at Balance 7. Be sure to check that out and get your free shipping of your product when you type in the code BLEAV, BLEAV, and our good friends at BetOnline. BetOnline, your online sportsbook expert. I look forward to seeing you on the mats.